Good morning, everyone. Um, Joe here. This is our last live stream in this kind of planned series we've had going for the last couple of months. The topic today is culture and community. And as always, I'm joined by my friend Josh. Josh, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. It's a gorgeous Sunday in Connecticut. I love that shirt, by the way. I meant to say that before we jumped
Oh,
on, but
thanks, man. I
we're so
appreciate it.
live.
It's new.
Yeah, yeah, nice. I figured as much. Yeah, it looks good.
Just a heads up, by the way. For the last week, I have been nursing an absolutely awful cold. I
Mm.
took a couple of days off work, so I might need to like mute myself every now and again for a quick coughing break. Uh, but I should be good at this point. I think I'm like a day away from being totally clear of it.
Wow.
Even yesterday, my voice was really like messed up. So, uh, I think we should be. I think we should be good. So, yeah, let's jump into it. Talking, like I said, culture and community.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about culture, particularly, Joe, why don't we start there? Can you dive in and kind of break it out? What are we going to be
Sure,
discussing in detail today?
sure. So I want to do a walkthrough of the various, I think, more human aspects of Cowlitz County. We've spent a lot of time talking about the structural stuff. We've talked about the just in the last couple of weeks, like the environment. We've talked about law enforcement and public safety. We've spent a lot of time talking about government. And I don't know that people would intrinsically attach the idea of culture to the function of a county commissioner. But I want to talk through, some of the things that I think make Cowlitz County really special. Some of the public spaces, some of the community groups focus on arts and creative work, and I want to dive into a couple of maybe not demographic aspects, but like I said, the kind of human stuff. How does Cowlitz County think and feel? That's generally what I mean by culture and community.
Mm.
Um, I'm pretty excited for this. I think it's going to be really interesting to dive into it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too, because I've been learning obviously so much about Cowlitz County being what, maybe 3,000 miles away, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit less. And I think I think it's soothing that it's kind of the last live stream too, right? Like we framed for you, at least, and for me, I've seen Cowlitz County through multiple different lenses and angles, and I think learning about the people and the community and the culture will put a nice bow on it for me, for lack of better words.
Cool.
Um, so, with that being said, Joe, can you give me a loaded question, high level summary, though, of what the culture of Cowlitz County is?
Yeah, this is my general thesis or general idea that I want to convey for today. Cowlitz County is not any one thing. um, I think it's important that we dive into the individual characteristics that make up Cowlitz County because I have, for the last few years, had an impression of what Cowlitz County was, even before coming here. I can't remember if I've shared this in the live stream setting, but I've certainly talked about it with people in my everyday life. Before we moved to this area, I did not have a positive impression of Cowlitz County. I didn't have a really negative one, but the only statement I'd ever heard about this area was a manager I used to work with who talked about its drug problems and homelessness problems.
Mm,
And pretty much nothing else was given to me prior to us moving up here. I was told that it was a conservative, hyper religious, rural community, and I think to some degree there are pockets of that. But every day I find more reasons to love this community and love it in its fullness, right? Every part of it. Um, the idea that Cowlitz County is not any one thing to me is really important to hold
mm,
if I'm going to be in a position of leadership. Because anybody making a statement like, well, the people of Cowlitz County want X, I want to know if that's true. And I want to know if that's the impression that we've been given because of the exposure that we've had, or if we've actually gone and tried to suss that out.
mm.
Um, as we'll go through each of these sections here, I want to kind of showcase some of the things that I think make this community special and prove my point that everywhere you look, you can find something unique if you go digging hard enough. And for that reason, we should not close ourselves off to our impression of what things are. So, circling back around to the main point, if I wanted to summarize the culture of Cowlitz County, Cowlitz County is not any one thing. And that, to me, is the essence of this community. You have 112, 120,000 people, depending on how you count. And that means that you have about that many unique perspectives and values. I think that there are some things that we can generally agree on as a community, but I don't think those define us. I think they just make it a little easier for us to talk. So, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I love it. Thoughtful as always, Joe, and thank you for kind of setting the stage as we dive into it. So why don't we take our first quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the role of county commissioners in community and culture.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, no worries.
And we're back talking about the role of commissioners now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's start high level. Why don't you break out, how county commissioners play a part in supporting, the community in Cowlitz County here, Joe?
Yeah, this is one I don't know people would immediately connect. The idea that a person in a position of government would have much, if anything, to do with community building is, I think, it might be unintuitive to people. And so there are a couple of specific, like, structural things that the commissioners have input into. But I think it's broader than just this position of leadership. So there's just a few things that the commissioners kind of oversee. One is the Cowlitz County Event Center and the Public Facilities District Board. We've talked before about board appointments. County commissioners have a hand in who is appointed to those boards, although they may not control every seat on the Public Facilities District Board. And the Event Center is a large space that is operated by the board, and is a space for community community events. We want to have maybe a concert performance. Just this last weekend, we had the Dark Market, which is hosted by a local business owner, and is an opportunity for a bunch of artists and local creators to come and sell their stuff. So the event center and the function of the event center as a community space that is available for that kind of community gathering, I think, is really really important. We are just now starting up a farmers market also on the event center grounds, which is really cool. They've had a little trouble with the rain over the last couple of weeks, but as the sun comes out, I think we'll see a little bit more activity there. And then the other aspect that I think the commissioners specifically play is with the Cowlitz County Historical Museum. I can't remember. Have we talked about the Historical Museum before?
No, we have not.
So the Cowlitz County Historical Museum is funded in part by the Cowlitz County Historical Society. So a lot of the information I've shared about the history of Cowlitz County comes from resources that they've created or had a hand in. The Historical Museum, you can go walk through, and it basically talks through a lot of the history of homesteading, the influence of the railroads, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about over the last couple of months. And the county provides funding, I believe, for the one full-time staff member. So the curator, I believe, is his title. and the county provides his salary. The Historical Society funds, I believe, almost anything else. I was just looking at the 2024 annual budget, and I think it amounts to about 183,000 that we provide to the Historical Museum out of county funds. That's the one, like, I think big, like, structural element of our influence on the community. We'll talk a little bit more later about community spaces like public libraries, for example, but those are primarily funded by cities. The one other area where commissioners might have an impact there is in the mapping of the library districts. So a few years ago, there was discussion about expanding the Woodland Library District so that it could receive more funding from a larger tax base. And the commissioners had to, I think, make the final approval on that to agree that the boundaries of the Woodland Library District could be expanded. At the state level, as far as like arts and culture goes, building a relationship with the Washington State Arts Commission could benefit our community by helping us advocate for grants. But those are I think the structural elements. So the event center, historical museum, the library districts, and the collaboration with state agencies and things like that.
Okay. And in your opinion, since we're starting to flex those a little bit more since our session a couple of weeks ago, where do you think the county commissioner could do better in terms of supporting or building the community?
We are in a loneliness epidemic. You don't have to look very hard to get statistics behind what I'm saying here, but I think especially young people feel disconnected from their communities. If they don't already have a base of connection through their family, if you didn't grow up here, it's hard to connect. It's hard to go out into the world and find people who feel like your friends and who you feel like you can relate to. I don't think this is a problem that is specific to cities. I think it's something that as a government we can take some responsibility over. Now, as far as our ability to influence that, I think our role to play is really in information, resources, for grants and for building community resources. We already provide some information now, but it's mostly about what kind of nonprofit resources are available. I think we could take a more active role in communicating how you get connected with the communities of Cowlitz County. I know as a transplant here, being here just about 3 and some years, it's been incredibly difficult for me to find spaces where I can connect and feel like I belong. And I don't know that a county government is necessarily responsible for that, but I think we could take an active role and in that way help to build community. That's where I feel like we kind of missed the mark. I don't know that, again, I'm kind of putting some thoughts out here that are somewhat unstructured. I don't know, again, that the government is responsible for this, but we can take an active role, and frankly, I don't know that there are a lot of others that are trying to step into that and trying to do that. If we as a government are trying to engage with the public, we also have a responsibility to understand who the public is. And if we are trying to understand who the public is, why can't we communicate that out to everybody else? So anyways, that's where I feel like we could be doing more, and putting more weight, using the structure the government is to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Joe. I couldn't agree more. So I appreciate you sharing that. Why don't we take another quick break and then we'll come back and we'll continue the conversation around community groups and spaces.
Absolutely. This is the stuff where it gets real fun.
Yeah.
All right, we'll pause. All right, we're back to talk about community groups and spaces.
Yeah. And let's dive right into it. As always, can you give us a high level breakdown of the kinds of community groups there are
Hmm.
in Cowlitz County?
Yeah, so I'll start with just a couple of ones that I found that I think are particularly fun. Facebook is a place where people connect, and there's a few small groups that are specific to Cowlitz County that I think are interesting to highlight. One is the Cowlitz Beekeepers Association. Got about 450 members right now on Facebook, and they post back and forth about helping to support local hives in the area. They have a little form you can fill out where you can alert them to a hive, and
Yeah.
it seems like a small but dedicated group of people thinking about the bees, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I love that.
We have a pretty big small business community. I think by recollection, I have the census numbers. Let's see if I can get those. But on Facebook, we have small businesses in Cowlitz County with about 3,000 members. Um, and yeah, like I said, we have a pretty um, big group like this. Actually, let me see. I think the Census Bureau has something like this here for business. We got 2,200 employers, 32,000 employed.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if this actually accounts for small businesses, but regardless, like I said, so we have a pretty big small business community, which is really nice. We have the Cowlitz County Poultry Group, about 250 people that are thinking about chickens
I love
and
that.
other poultry, I'm sure. But again, you go into that group and it's a lot of photos of chickens and people swapping stories and chickens, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool. We have about 600 people in a Pokemon Go group dedicated to
Oh,
Cowlitz County. Um, have you ever? I don't know if this is something that's that you guys would have over in your area, but do y'all have like those little painted rocks anywhere? You know what I'm talking about?
mm,
Oh,
yeah. Well, I mean, potentially, like that you just see like out and like hiking on a trail or something like that.
yeah. So we've got a Facebook group called Cowlitz County Rocks, and it's got
Okay.
about 9,000 people. And it's again, I'm not sure how big it is elsewhere, but at least in this area, you can be walking around and you see just little rocks, usually about this big, that have like pictures painted on them, positive messages, things like
Oh,
that.
I love that.
Um, yeah, we just kind of see those moved around. I think the general practice is that if you see one, you can pick it up and move it to somewhere else, or you can pick it up and replace it with one, and then take that other one and move it somewhere else.
That's fun.
They have a couple of guidelines like no profanity or things like that, but otherwise it's a pretty free form way of community expression, which I think is
Yeah.
pretty cool. I'm always a big fan of things that you can get into without needing to interact directly. I think that um, I know that for my generation and younger, it's harder and harder to justify interacting with strangers. And something like that is a really low stakes way of connecting with people, even in your own mind, right? Um,
All
so
right.
anyways, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the painted rocks. I really do. I mean, like we have them. It's not a formed group like that, but there's one trail around us where there is a section and they're all gathered and they're like positive messages or vibes.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's
I
pretty
think
cool.
it's great. Yeah, that would it makes some of these day.
Yep. We've got about 500 in a group called Cowlitz County Photographers. Um, we also have the Washington Young Farmers Association. This is something I'm not super connected to, but I want to build more relationship with. I was talking to a gal a few weeks ago and asking her kind of where I can connect with groups like that, and she talked about programs like 4-H, which we've talked about before. But the Young Farmers Association is meant to be a space for people who are new into farming and help provide support resources. It's a state level group, but they do have it seems like a pocket in Cowlitz County. We also have a pretty, from what I understand, a pretty robust gaming community.
Nice.
So there's Blue Cat Games at the Three Rivers Mall. They have I think pretty much daily game nights, where you can come in and play like D&D. I've been there a couple times for like Jackbox games. I don't know if you've played Jackbox before, but pretty
Yeah.
pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then there's J&L Games at the Three Rivers Mall. They have a pretty big. I think it's Warhammer is the little figurine game.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Warhammer, that's a throwback. Somebody we work with would be stoked about that.
yeah,
He spends a lot of time painting his Warhammer models. Sorry to
that's
throw you
fun.
off track.
And then we also have Emerald Haven, which is I think mostly a board game shop, but they do a lot of I think like Pokemon tournaments, and I think all of these have some elements of like Magic the Gathering and things like that as well. I
Yeah.
think trying to be just accessible to people. And then we have another game shop called Dangerous Gentleman that has game space, and they I think focus a little bit more on like tabletop games like D&D things like that. Um, but yeah, so we have a community presence of gaming in this area. It is mostly focused around the city of Longview. It doesn't really get further out from that. But I believe that people who live outside of the city like travel in to come to these spaces and connect with people. Again, if part of our struggle in building community is having a challenge with connecting with people, games can be a little bit more low stakes, especially if you are already comfortable with a game system of some kind. You can come and connect with people and know that your interaction is going to go, just for that period of time.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that.
So yeah, that's kind of all the little community groups that I wanted to highlight. Again, I think each of those is if you look at the total of Cowlitz County, each of them is pretty small compared to the overall population. But going back to that main point, these groups exist, right? And I think it's important that we acknowledge that we have these community groups. Uh, they are a part of Cowlitz County, even if they're not your Cowlitz County, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, especially if we're going to be making decisions that affect some parts. One of the things I'm really excited about is being able to go to groups like the Beekeepers Association and getting their feedback on things. Are there things that we could be doing better? Like that kind of stuff is really interesting to me. Knowing that there are these groups that are focused in a particular area, what might they have to say that we might not be thinking of?
Yeah.
That kind of thing is really exciting and interesting to me. I'm always looking for different ways of thinking about a problem. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that about you, by the way. So,
well, thank you, buddy.
yeah. I guess just one question there. I
Mhm.
mean, where do you see do you see you as a county commissioner stopping at just engaging with these groups to better understand the problem, or do you think there's a role for you to play as a county commissioner to help promote some of these groups outside of Facebook? Like you said, they're relatively small
Yeah.
compared to the population, so talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I don't know that a government is necessarily, like I said, I don't
Yeah.
know that the government is responsible for
Sure.
building these communities, but at the same time, because we have a bird's eye view into the community, I think it does make sense for us to spend time highlighting these maybe like kind of niche areas. Because if you're new to this area and you're struggling to find community for yourself, if there can be an information center of some kind that can help you, I think that there should be. Now, we have a couple of mechanisms that are providing a little bit of this. So, for example, the Kelso Longview Chamber of Commerce helps you connect with businesses. But I've also worked with some friends. It's kind of fallen off the last couple of months, but I've worked with some friends to help try to highlight some additional, community groups and things like that. Um, I guess the long and short of it is yes, I do feel like as a commissioner, I can play a role in highlighting some of these unique groups and helping to raise them up. I don't know how much money we could dedicate to that, but I certainly can dedicate energy to it and time. So that kind of stuff I'm really interested in doing.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you, Joe.
For sure.
All right, we kind of got into it a little bit at the end with the gaming
Mhm.
community and some of those spaces that are open, but I'm sure this one might go a little bit broader than
Mhm.
that. But you talk to me about other community spaces that are available in Cowlitz County.
Yeah, so I mentioned them before, but public libraries
Yeah.
are really important community spaces. We have the Longview Public Library, Kelso Public Library, Castle Rock, Kalama, and the Woodland Community Library.
Hmm.
And each of these, if you've not regularly interacted with a public library before, they are community spaces.
Yeah.
For example, the Longview Public Library often has um, classes, things you can just show up to help you learn a little bit more about your community.
Yeah.
There's a monthly group that meets called Issues for Our Times that gets into discussion about public issues. They most recently talked about like artificial intelligence. Before that, it was the Israel Palestine conflict.
Hmm.
But the Longview Public Library has a lot of resources to help you connect with your community. Those are really like city specific, and so I think that we do need to be thinking about Cowlitz County as a whole. Like we've talked about before, roughly 49% of people live outside of city, and so not everybody has access to library resources. Um, and frankly, the libraries don't serve everybody in Cowlitz County. This is actually something I was talking with a friend who lives out pretty far outside of city limits. They are not able to get a library card because their community voted specifically against paying a tax that would give them access to library resources. And so while I think these are really important public spaces and they absolutely need to be supported, they don't hit on everybody who could be engaging with them.
Yeah.
There's just kind of an untapped group. Maybe they don't want to connect, but I think they probably do. So again, I think the commissioners have to be thinking about this stuff. Now, again, I think it's important to balance the tax question with access to resources. But I'm trying to think about how we can collect everybody up under one roof and think about us all as a group. Um,
Yeah.
have you had many experiences with public libraries? I know I have.
Yeah, I indeed, yes. Me and my wife are very big public library fans. The one in the town that we grew up in, Connecticut, is lovely and has amazing resources, classes, free concerts, things like that, book sales once a year, right? Has a great kind of kid space and even like an arts and crafts center. And I think it's just such a good space. And as geeky as it sounds, maybe that's not the right word, but like, yeah, that's where me and my friends would walk to, right?
For
After
sure.
school, there was a path right from the school that connected us to town center because small Connecticut East Coast town. And there it was, spent hours in the library until somebody's mom came and picked us up, or we walked home or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, near my work in Vancouver, we have the Fort Vancouver Regional Library, and that's a really awesome space. But in the city of Longview, the Longview Public Library is just gorgeous.
Hmm.
It was built, I think, post New Deal, so it was kind of designed with the sort of grandiose, let's get something that looks really cool and impressive,
Yeah.
and they did a good job with it. Um, but I do see our public libraries as a really important resource for building community.
Yeah.
I personally know that I did not have a lot of spaces that I could go and just be. And there are not a lot of places in our country today where you can just go hang out at no cost. Um, as we've moved towards a more profit-driven society, fewer and fewer of those spaces crop up. You kind of can't go and just like hang out in spaces. A library is one of the only places I think it's possible for you to do that. So I think things like that are really valuable, and they're one element of maintaining a strong, cohesive community structure. If you can feel like part of a group, you can maybe get a little bit more connected, and then get a little bit more involved. Um,
Yeah.
there's a couple of other community spaces I think that are cool to highlight. So another is the Children's Discovery Museum. Here in Longview, we have a museum that is free for kids and parents, And I've met with the director Seth. Man, he's such a passionate guy about this. One of the specific like policies they have is that you can't drop your kids off and then leave. It's really important that going through the Discovery Museum, that is a parent-child activity that you're doing together. Uh, and so while it's provided for free, it's not like a a daycare center where you can just drop somebody off and have them go explore. And they really want you to get involved with your kids learning about new things. They had an exhibit for music and for creation of music. They had one for theater that was in collaboration with, I think, Stageworks, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So it's a free space that's available for folks. One of the things that I think is important to think about is a government's ability to support those spaces. While it is inside the city of Longview limits, it is still part of Cowlitz County. And I know that historically they've struggled for funding. I don't know what's available to us as a commissioner's board for providing funding to spaces like that, but I would absolutely entertain it as something worth considering to think of as a community resource. So those kinds of things I think are really valuable as well. We're already putting some money towards the historical museum, and I think I understand the merits of that pretty well. But I just see no reason why we wouldn't want to think about providing more support for spaces like that. We also have the Rains Rainbow Center. This is relatively new, but this is a space that focuses on serving the LGBTQ community. And I think that the need is most pronounced there for younger folks, especially, we talk about this isolation epidemic. It's especially pronounced if you also identify with a kind of an outlier group. I know that it's becoming more and more common for kids to be thinking about their identity and where they fit in. And so having a space that is open for you to talk about that, to think about that, to get advice from people who've asked those same questions of themselves, I think is really valuable as well. And then there's just like a few other groups that I think are worth highlighting as well. But sorry, before I jump into that, any questions about any of the public spaces that I just talked about? Anything you're interested in digging into?
No, not just yet. I mean, I love it though. There's more than I thought, and I don't mean that in a negative way, right?
Sure.
Like it's just it's I think it's fantastic. So no, carry on, please.
Yeah. Well, and again, if the thesis of all of this is Cowlitz County is not any one thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
then I think each of those has their place. It's really cool to draw those kinds of things out. I'll tell you, like, when I was first doing research into Cowlitz County, this was back at the end of last year, I was surprised at all the things that I found when I went looking. There's a lot of businesses in this area that serve a community need as well, but I'm talking specifically here about the kind of free resources. And so there's a couple of community organizations that I think are worth highlighting. One is the Highland Neighborhoods Association. The Highlands Neighborhood Association focuses on the Highlands neighborhood, which is the southern part of Longview. If you remember from our discussions about the development of the city of Longview, the Highlands neighborhood was kind of not an afterthought, but they sort of left as the underdeveloped part of the city. When other neighborhoods got concrete, the Highlands neighborhood got gravel. And that's just one example of the struggles that they've had. And so it seems as though they felt it worthwhile to create a community group that was focused on serving the needs of the Highlands neighborhood, which I think is really cool. And I would advocate for more community associations like that if people felt that they also had a specific need. We also have the Longview Pioneer Lions, which is a group of, from their website, about 170 people. They focus on, among other things, fighting blindness. But they're a volunteer organization that does a lot of community projects. I remember at Squirrel Fest last year, they had a food truck and they were serving food out of it. They think about things like environmental needs, feeding the hungry, aiding seniors and disabled, and they also provide youth scholarships. So the Longview Pioneer Lions are a group that is pretty well known. You might see people with like the Lions hats or shirts or things like that. And I believe they are part of a national network of Lions, but I know specifically our group is the Longview Lions.
Okay.
And then lastly, one other space I think worth highlighting is the Pleasant Hill Grange. Granges are something at least state specific, if not nationally, something that is available. They're essentially like spaces that are available for rent for things like events, celebrations of life, stuff like that. So the Pleasant Hill Grange is out of Kelso, and is just a space you can go that is a relatively low cost. That if you need a community gathering space, you can go and purchase, purchase a little bit of time in a space like that. So these are all things that I think are worth celebrating, and if we have the opportunity to supporting, right? It makes sense to me that in the interest of building a community, we would look for these kinds of collaborative groups, these kinds of spaces, and find ways if we can to support them. Again, I don't know exactly what money we can dedicate towards them, but at the very least, talking about them and sharing information, I think that's a pretty vital function for a government to serve. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Joe. I appreciate that. And then so I know that we started really kind of diving into this,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think within these spaces, they talk about certain organizations, but outside of what we were just talking about, like, is there anything else that you want to highlight here? Any other organizations? Anything else that you want to call out in this section, Joe?
Ooh, one thing that's not really included in my notes are the few political groups.
Mm,
Um, these are ones that I feel like people are generally aware of. But I was just taking an inventory with a friend of mine yesterday, with my coordinator yesterday for my campaign. Um, I think these are worth highlighting if you want to get connected with the local political scene. There aren't very many. So we have the Cowlitz County Republican Central Committee and the Cowlitz County Democratic Central Committee. We also have Cowlitz County Democratic Women and the Lower Columbia Republicans United. The latter group was formed out of, I think, some division with the Cowlitz County Republican Central Committee, which is associated with the state. Those four groups kind of make up the political landscape of Cowlitz County in terms of their support for particular political work. We've talked before about like city and county agencies and the roles that they have. So I think those have an important contribution to community building. And I hear rumors that there is a group called the League of Women Voters that is going to be starting up a chapter again in this area and getting a little bit more activity behind them. So I think that's the only other thing that comes to mind that isn't captured somewhere else in the discussion today. But these are important groups as well. I have so much respect for people who are willing to dedicate time out of their month, out of their week, even if there's not a specific directive that they're following, that they are willing to show up because they know it's important to get involved. That's one thing I feel we're missing, is a lot of community involvement in these discussions about politics and about the way that our systems work. I think we are generally apathetic, and I think we have a lot of good evidence to say we should be, because we don't really see us getting what we want. But these groups are taking an active role in engaging with the community and trying to get things done, which I think is really valuable. There's a number of other smaller political action groups that I won't list out here, but those are, I think, worth highlighting too in this whole discussion about the culture and community of Cowlitz.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. As always, I appreciate how much information you're able to store with that. So, thanks for walking us through that. I think you gave everybody a lot to kind of chew on, and you also highlighted some great aspects of Cowlitz County that everybody can now get involved in as they want to.
For sure.
So, I appreciate that. Let's take a quick break and then come back and talk art and culture.
Awesome. All right, we're back to talk about art and culture in Cowlitz County.
Yeah. And as always, I'll keep it high level to start. So why don't we kick it off, Joe, with talking about, how robust is the art scene in Cowlitz County? Give us a little bit of a breakdown.
Yeah, we have a lot of local artists. I mean, art is, I think, a really important aspect of expression. There's a lot of music, but specifically there's a few things with like actual, like art creation that I think are really valuable. If you go through the city of Longview, you just walk down Commerce Avenue, we have a lot of sculptures. There's a lot of statues and depictions of people like R.A. Long and other prominent historical figures to the development of the city of Longview and surrounding areas. But specifically, I want to talk about kind of the active scene. So we have the Broadway Art Gallery in Longview. That has 31 local artists that are spotlighted, at least from their website. And they have things like art classes, including classes for that focus specifically on children, and classes that focus on adults. And you can walk through the Broadway Art Gallery and see a bunch of local artists highlighted. There's also the Kelso Paint and Sip, which they host parties for people to help come and learn to paint. There's a lot of events that are specific to kids, helping them get engaged with new mediums like painting. And then if you go to any like local festivals, you'll see just a ton of people who are creators. My partner and I like walking around like farmers markets and things like that, and we purchased like new squirrel feeders from a woodworker. We've gotten a couple of different things like that. I mentioned the dark market earlier, and that's a great creator space. Getting like earrings and stickers and stuff like that is really cool. One guy that came to mind as I was thinking about this is Reese Photo Art. He has a display at the Kalama Public Market. And one of the things that's really interesting about his work is, in addition to his photography work, he also does a lot of AI generated art. And we had a really interesting discussion about the merits of AI generated art, and his perspective on why he feels like it is an appropriate use of these tools. He does not feel the same as other people I've seen that are kind of critical of art created by computers, because he says, it does still take a lot of work to create something unique and special. And just because it's assisted by a computer doesn't mean that it's not art, which I think is really cool. I know that's like controversial, but I just appreciated his perspective on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in terms of public support for art, we have a couple of cool elements. One is the Washington State Arts Commission at Lower Columbia College. So there's a public display space within LCC that has local artist exhibitions. And then we have the Rose Center at Lower Columbia College. The Rose Center is a big facility. They have the Forsberg Art Gallery, which has a rotating series of exhibitions from local artists. The Wollenberg Auditorium, which is a 525-seat performance auditorium. And Center Stage Theater, which is a 125-seat theater that's meant for like performance or lecture or things like that. So we've got a lot of supporting spaces for artists. I know Lower Columbia College has a number of art programs. They've got a music program. I've tried to engage and get involved a little bit here and there, but I would say in totality, the art scene in Cowlitz County is pretty robust, at least in terms of like creation and support. So
yeah, I would say so. And we got to it a little bit at the end with some of the Rose Center and things like that. Can you dive specifically into the performing arts scene?
Oh yeah, not even specifically thinking about the Rose Center, but we got the Columbia Theater. That's not the only one, but it's one I've got on my list. Columbia Theater has an interesting story. So this building was developed in the 1920s. The Columbia Theater opened in 1925. and it was actually scheduled for demolition in 1979. The building had basically become downtrodden, and in May of 1980, it is important to think about the time frame there. May of 1980, it was scheduled for demolition. Do you remember a really big event that we talked about in 1980 in Washington?
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
Mount St. Helens.
the eruption of the big volcano.
Yeah.
So actually, the demolition of the Columbia Theater was interrupted by the eruption of Mount St. Helens, and
Oh
so
my
it sat undemolished for a while. Yeah, May 18th, 1980.
Yeah, right around
So
the corner.
while the building sat dormant, kind of unoccupied, they created the Columbia Theater Task Force, and the Columbia Theater Task Force was specifically purposed to restore the Columbia Theater as a regional performing arts center. So today, it's a pretty active theater. They have like children's theater programs. There's the summer theater camp, Robin Hood theater camp, the Harry Potter acting camp. There's the Fiber Federal Credit Union Rainy Months series. Fiber Federal is a credit union that's local to this area. Um, so they have, I think, a pretty important contribution to the performing arts and like cultural history of Cowlitz County. In addition to the Columbia Theater, we also have the Love Street Playhouse. That is a community theater out of Woodland. They were created in 2007 and have a pretty regular series of performances that they put on. Probably the one that I'm most familiar with, just because I'm connected with some people that are involved, is Stageworks Playhouse or Stageworks Northwest. They're a community nonprofit theater in Longview. They're a volunteer-based organization. They put on 4 to 5 productions each year. They've got currently they're running through Dial M for Murder. Then they've got 3 more happening this year. But they're a pretty big group of thespian enthusiasts. I know a few people that are a little bit more involved with the production side of it than they are with the actual like acting. But it's a volunteer group that does these performances, and you pay a ticket price to go see it, and so yeah, I mean our performing arts scene specifically, I think is pretty active. You don't have to look very hard to find opportunities to engage with that if that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff I think is really cool to talk about.
Yeah, I love that. And you kind of led me into my next question with how you ended that. Engage, right? So you're talking a lot about these amazing aspects of the community and the culture, Cowlitz County. Joe, where or what are some of your favorite spots to engage with the community in Cowlitz County? Talk me through that. I want to hear
Yeah.
your.
Again, having been here 3 years, I haven't had as many opportunities as I would like to get into all these individual aspects. But I'll give you some of the spaces I've engaged with that I really like. One is a bar in Kelso called Erebus. Erebus is a really cool little space. You go in and it is red neon lights, posters of horror movies and of metal bands, and I've been there a couple of times to do karaoke with my friends. They have live music. I haven't been to any concerts there, but I've seen clips of metal shows and things like that. So they're a pretty active little scene in Kelso. It's super neat. Last time we were there, they were playing a dental horror movie in the background on the screens, which is pretty interesting. Not everybody's going to be comfortable in a space like that, but I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is.
For something a little bit quieter, I really like the Antidote Tap House. They pretty regularly have live music. Usually it's 1 or 2 performers, but I've specifically gone there for trivia nights a couple of times. I'm not good at trivia, which might surprise you.
Yeah, that does surprise.
No, because I think I'm a little too confident in my niche knowledge. So it's really important for me to have a team of people with me so that we can kind of think through it together. But Yeah, Antidote is a great little space. I like going there on a weeknight and just hanging out. They've got really good tacos, although their tacos are going away, so I'm disappointed.
Wow.
Um, and then I've been to at least one live jazz performance at Roland Wines. So we've got a huge like brewery and tap house scene. Roland Wines is a winery that I believe they have their own vineyard and they're family owned. And I went there with a couple of friends to hear a jazz band performance, which was really cool. So again, so most of my engagement with the community has been through these kind of little like local spots.
Yeah.
I haven't had as much opportunity to get into all of the unique aspects of Cowlitz County, but I also don't know that anybody really could.
Yeah.
There's just a lot to try to engage with.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting though. So
Awesome. I love that. And yeah, I being conscious of time, I want to shift gears a little bit in
sure.
this section and move on to can we talk a little bit about the ethnic makeup of Cowlitz County and how that plays a role in the culture?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if the broad like thesis here is Cowlitz County is not any one thing, I think it's important that we highlight some of the maybe minority groups, right? Like, that word is feels a little politically charged. When we're talking about a minority, we're just talking about groups that are not the majority, right?
Yeah.
And in that way, I think it's important to highlight the international communities that are part of Cowlitz County. We have enough international communities that we have an international festival every year at Lower Columbia College. I was really cool this last year to see performances from Pacific Islander groups.
Yeah.
We have there's a Russian group. We have it seems like it's a Chinese group, and a lot of different small organizations that are focused on highlighting and creating connections with international communities. In Cowlitz County, 90% of Cowlitz County identifies as white, about 1.2% as Black or African American alone, 2.2% American Indian and Alaska Native, 1.8% Asian, about 0.5% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, 4.1% identify as two or more races, and then about 10.4% identify as Hispanic or Latino. So, we are primarily white identifying, but at the
Mhm.
same time, we have enough, I think, smaller groups that it's really important we don't think about ourselves as a monolith, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's there's I think an element of um, it's hard for us to recognize where we might struggle in these areas because we have kind of limited exposure to other cultures and other communities. I think having smaller ethnic groups gives us the opportunity to learn where we still need to grow and develop. There are some that have the perception that we don't have a problem with like racism in this area, and I think part of that has to do with our non-white population is relatively small compared to other parts of the state, other parts of the country. We do not have as many non-white people, and
Mhm.
so I'm trying to be sensitive to this. I'm trying not to get too much into the weeds on the kind of racial disparities and things like that. But again, the overall thesis here is Cowlitz County is not any one thing, and in that way, I think we need to be conscious of the ethnic makeup of a community like ours. We have the Ethnic Support Council, which I think we've talked about before. They're specifically focused on supporting unique groups. They were initially started to focus on, I believe, Vietnamese and Cambodian folks that came to this area. So we have things that are here specifically to think about the needs of uh, the needs of a community that is not the majority.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, anyways, I think that's an important aspect of our community that we need to be conscious of.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. I hear you there. And I think maybe a good way to dive into that a little bit more is talking about organizations that um, might be focused on supporting diverse communities
Hmm.
within Cowlitz County, Joe. So any
Sure.
organizations you want to highlight there?
Yeah. In addition to the Ethnic Support Council, we have a couple of groups that are really interesting. So out in Ariel, which we haven't talked about a whole ton, but it's a city out in eastern Cowlitz County. If you go around kind of the south border, we have the Laluska Cultural Center. This was founded in 1977 to help preserve the cultural heritage of Native peoples in North America, named after Chief Laluska, if I'm not mistaken. And they have workshops, programs, classes, museum tours that are offered throughout the year to help people engage with what they call living history. There's a few events in the coming months that are like performances to help people engage with Native experiences. Of course, we have the Cowlitz County tribe. The tribe members today engage in a lot of practices that have been passed down through the Cowlitz tribe and through the surrounding areas. Um, they have the Cowlitz powwow, which is apparently one of the largest in southern Washington. And then, in addition to those groups, one other that I think is particularly prominent is the Sons of Norway. Sons of Norway is they're a national organization with a local chapter here in Kelso, and they're focused on promoting and preserving the heritage and culture of Norway. And
Who would have guessed?
yeah, so they have like they're also pretty prominent at the international festival.
Yeah.
But they have like monthly social gatherings with other folks that claim Norwegian heritage, and they one one of their specific things that's off on their website is while offering our members the protection of solid financial products and services. So it seems like there's an element of that as well.
Yeah.
The Breda Blick Lodge, it might be Breda Blick. I feel like Breda Blick might be right. That was started in 1930, and so that has a pretty long history in this area as well.
Mm.
So those are just some other groups that I think are thinking about the diverse cultural heritage of Cowlitz County. I think it's really important that we have groups like this. The largest one by far, of course, is going to be the tribe because of the tribal population in this area. But each of these groups plays an important role in supporting groups that might not be served otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy for us to kind of put our blinders on and think about people that are like us, that think like us, that talk like us. And if we're interested in building a community, we need to be thinking about everybody. In my mind, community is every single thing in Cowlitz County. And that means every group, no matter how small, is worth highlighting and worth some focus and attention. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Community-led solutions. You can't have
Well,
community-led solutions without highlighting and thinking about everybody, right? To an
sure.
extent, not to put words in your mouth.
No,
but
you're right though. I mean, so the tribe, for example, I think is already involved to some degree in the managing of the ecosystem of the environment. They have relationships with like the U.S. Forest Service, and they're they have historically been thinking about the environment. There's a lot of wisdom that I think comes from Native communities, Indigenous communities in our area and in other areas across the country. And bringing them into the discussion is really important. Forest management practices, for example, are not foreign to Indigenous communities as much as they might feel like a new thing. We have been for I would say thousands of years thinking about ways that we can benefit our community, not benefit our environment, not take too much from it. And so those influences are really really important. In diversity of perspective, we can find the best answer from all that's available. I was thinking about this. We talked about this way back in the philosophy of freedom. But if you remember, there was this guy, John Stuart Mill,
Yep.
who I don't remember how much you remember from him, but one of the things he talked about is the value of the minority voice Again, I want to be careful not to use the politically charged term here, so I'm going to talk about this as outliers. The value of outliers. John Stuart Mill argued that we should always be willing to hear somebody's opinion that is different than the majority perspective. He was very afraid of the tyranny of the majority because he felt that as long as we are going based off of what the majority wants, we are potentially closing ourselves off from the right answer. We need eccentricity. We need outliers. We need people who don't think like us, who can come and give us ideas that we might have never thought of on our own. It is very easy as humans to get locked into one particular perspective and insist to ourselves that it's the right answer because it's the only one we've ever heard. And so the value in having a diverse set of perspectives, a diverse set of cultures, is that we have a whole lot more sets of ideals and values to pull from to find the best answer. I see this as a responsibility for myself as a representative, if I'm put in the position as county commissioner, to go out and try to get that perspective, as many unique ideas as I can, for the ways that things should probably be, because it's from that I think we'll find what the best answer probably is. If we close ourselves off to just people who think like us, we might lose something, we might miss something that could benefit us just because we've not thought of it yet. So anyways, that's kind of in defense of these groups. We need that unique perspective, even if it's just to help us figure out if we're missing something, right? So yeah. Anyways.
Well said. I think that's a perfect way to kind of carry us out here. Being conscious of time, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about religion in Cowlitz County.
Okay, cool. And we're back. Let's talk about religion.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe gonna start this one a little bit differently than I usually do, and start by asking you, Joe, why focusing on just religion in general and the religious aspect of Cowlitz County. Why does it help you as a county commissioner?
Sure. Well, one, I think it's really important that I'm sensitive to this, because there are a lot of people who I think disagree with the idea that religion and government have anything to do with each other. I'm generally on the side that there is a value in a separation between church and state, right? That has a lot of backing through our country's history. Initially we started, well, started. people who came to the New World did so because they wanted religious freedom, and they recognized that it was an injustice to have religion and the state, coexisting or tied together like we saw at the time. But second, for me as a leader in a community, I think it's really important to recognize the influence that religion and moral systems have on the community. Um, it is something that we need to be conscious of, if for no other reason than that other people are conscious of it. Um, I was at a public meeting a few weeks ago and was asked in what ways I relate to Republicans or to the American right. And this is one area where I feel like I can empathize a little bit more, which is the desire to integrate our morality with our system of government. Um, we cannot insist that the beliefs we have in right and wrong need to be separated from the law. If for no other reason than that people feel a drive to have their laws aligned with their morality. And so religion is not so directly tied to morality that I think they're one and the same thing. Religion obviously has a lot of cultural significance, right? Like, if you identify as a Christian, you are generally attaching yourself to a group of people who behave the way that Christians do, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's important as a person in a position of authority over a community that I am aware and conscious of the influence of religion in serving that community. Now, I think as we'll get into, I don't know that it's as straightforward as people might believe on its face. But that's why I think it's important for us to go through this part of it, and why I kind of wanted to isolate it out separate from the other aspects of community and culture in this area. So
Yeah, I think that's valuable, and I appreciate that. One of the things that you kind of started off with, and I'm not tying you to these associations because you already kind of disassociated, but in the beginning of this segment, you were talking about, like, just before you moved to Cowlitz County, what you heard about it and the connotation you picked up from other people. And one of it was, overly religious. I'm kind of summarizing. So
sure.
are there, based on that, Joe, now having been a citizen of Cowlitz County, lived there for over 3 years, are there any misconceptions around religion in the county that you would like to clear up or at least talk about here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've heard this statement made by a lot of people who I believe identify themselves with a faith community, like the Christian faith, that Cowlitz County is a Christian community, for example. That was certainly the impression that I had before coming here. I want to just throw out a couple of statistics that I think are a little different, or tell a little bit of a different story. So a lot of these numbers are coming from the Association of Religion Data Archives, ARDA, and they're coming from 2020. So this might be a little outdated. The percentages might be a little off from where things are now. We're probably not going to see too much variation because, generally speaking, people don't make wide, diametrical shifts in their thinking. But in total, about 40,000 residents in Cowlitz County identified with some kind of religious institution or faith in 2020. That means approximately 64% of Cowlitz County residents are unaffiliated with a major religion, based on this data. And I think that's probably the biggest maybe misconception that we might have about the makeup of Cowlitz County. The idea that the religious perspective is the majority perspective could well be coming from the lack of exposure to people who don't think the way that we do. I remember going to church, and a quick summary of my background for anybody who's listening to this for the first time. I grew up as the son of a pastor. I've been a part of the Christian religion for pretty much my entire life, up until the last 5 years or so. I have a bachelor's degree in biblical theology, a lot of exposure to Christian thinking. I was a worship pastor for a number of years, was heavily involved in worship ministry for a long time. And it's only been the last couple of years that I've really felt a distance from that belief system. But I have a lot of background and a lot of, like I said, empathy for that way of thinking. And so I've heard this narrative that well, Cowlitz County is a Christian group, and that means that we should be allowing the Christian faith to influence the decisions that we make in positions of public service. That one number alone, 64% to me suggests that might not be true. I know that people have a personal relationship with their faith, but that's reports from churches. So that's churches who are saying, here's the number of people that we have in in regular attendance. And I just think it's important to consider, right? I'm not saying that those numbers are definitive, but that compared to the whole, it does not appear that even the majority of people in Cowlitz County identify with the faith. If they do, they don't regularly practice, right? Again, I want to be careful in making broad assertions there, but it just, those numbers don't seem to quite add up with the perception that people have.
Yeah. I think those stats speak to everything, and I think oftentimes things happen in the vacuum, right?
For sure. I want to
go ahead.
If I could, I wanted to share just a couple of statistics that come from this to give you a sense of kind of what the makeup is of that group of 40,000.
Yeah.
So we have 104 Christian churches in Cowlitz County. There are 3 Seventh-day Adventist churches, about 1,300 or so adherents. We have 4 Catholic churches with about 6,100 Catholics. 5 Latter-day Saints churches or Mormon churches, Mormon temples maybe is the right word for it. 4,200 people who adhere to that according to these statistics. 4 Jehovah's Witnesses churches with about 1,700 adherents as well. And then the remaining 26,000 affiliated with a religion, according to ARDA, are associated to Protestant religions. The largest group of those, about 17,000, are associated to non-denominational churches.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, there is a broad, a big, community of believers, of Christians, especially in this area. And I think their perspective is absolutely worthy of consideration, and that we should be thinking about them as a large group. But at the same time, just knowing that there are 40,000 people who are, in regular attendance, for example, there are a whole lot of other people that don't regularly go to church, that don't regularly engage with the Christian faith. And again, if we think about the value of unique perspective, you can get that perspective, but you also need to be thinking about the other perspectives that exist in an area as well. So just wanted to throw a couple of those numbers out.
No, I appreciate that, and it actually helps where I was going to, and kind of to round out this topic here, Joe. Before we recap, are there any outlier groups in Cowlitz County that we haven't discussed today?
Yeah, so we have 2 Buddhist temples in Cowlitz County and 2 Buddhist retreat centers. I looked up the difference between those two, by the way, because I wasn't entirely sure. A temple is a larger, public place for communal worship, education, ceremonies. They often have resident monks or nuns. A Buddhist hermitage or retreat center is usually like a smaller, secluded retreat center, usually not open to the public, more for intensive meditation and spiritual practice. But yeah, we've got 2 temples and 2 hermitages in this area. We also have a Maronite monastery that completed construction a few years ago. Maronites are members of an Eastern Catholic Church with the Holy See of Rome, primarily based out of Syria. And they have a strong presence in Lebanon, where they're one of the main Christian communities, but they also have communities in Cyprus, Israel, and a few other countries. They're influenced by the Syriac Orthodox Church. They have their own patriarch, and they're part of the broader Catholic Church tradition. But yeah, we have a monastery in this area, out in western Cowlitz County. I was kind of going through a bunch of the little forest roads, and I stumbled on this building, and I was like, what is a Maronite? I've never heard that name.
Yeah. Really cool.
Also from ARDA, we have 117 residents in Cowlitz County that associate themselves with the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i faith is a monotheistic religion that's based out of 19th century Persia, today Iran. It's not a part of Islam, but its origins are tied in some ways to the Shia Muslim environment that it was born in. Um, the Baha'i faith was first mentioned in American history in 1893, and they were officially incorporated in 1927. So we have a small community of Baha'i believers as well. And then one other group that I think is interesting is one that I have a few friends involved with. It's called the Religion of Arts, Theater, and Science.
Hmm.
Rats. um, they are a religious group that is kind of separating from the traditional religious tradition. Um, they're kind of following in the way of a few other, you might call them like protest religions. But the idea is that, in order to gain the same kind of protections that other religions have, they wanted to create one, at least as far as I know. I hope I'm not misrepresenting anybody here. But they wanted to create a group that had the same kind of religious protections as other religions do, that could put forward a few specific sets of ideals. Fact-based, peer-reviewed science. I'm just kind of reading through the list. Um, Avoiding intolerance, except against the intolerant. They want to advocate for the benefits of marijuana, equality, welcoming and trying to avoid pejorative language, free marriage, protection of environment, and access to abortion. I think the last statement, we are responsible for our future. This is another smaller group in this area. They have about 160 members in their Facebook group right now. And this is one of the only other like prominent outlier groups that I could find that considers themselves a religion. So I thought that was interesting to highlight as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, again, going back to kind of the broad point, and the reason I wanted to bring these up is because we do want to try to engage with as many unique perspectives as we can. And if we're thinking about the religion in Cowlitz County and the value of that and the value systems that people hold, we need to be conscious of the fact that not everybody identifies with a religion. In fact, it seems that most people don't. But at the same time, there's a very large group of people who do associate themselves with some kind of organized religion. And we need to be conscious of that. We don't necessarily need to let that influence our decision making, because it's not necessarily true that something which aligns with a religion is the right decision. But at the same time, we can't ignore it and shuttle it off and say, hey, that should have no part of the conversation here. It is important that we keep that in mind, even if it's just for the sake of being respectful of people's views. So, yeah. Again, I don't want to get way too into the weeds on it, but that's part of what I wanted to highlight here.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. So why don't we take a quick section? My God, a quick break, and we'll come back to the last section and let you recap.
Cool. Sounds good. Okay. Let's summarize.
Yeah, sounds good, Joe. Let's go all the way back to the beginning and start the same way we did. To kick things off, how would you describe the culture of Cowlitz County?
Like I said at the beginning, my main thesis, Cowlitz County is not any one thing. We have a wide variety of people and ways of thinking. It would be really hard for me to summarize Cowlitz County in one particular way. There are parts of our community that identify as rural and parts that identify as city. There are parts of our community that identify as religious and parts that don't. parts that identify as creative, and others that don't, right? And I think if we're trying to be conscious of the culture of Cowlitz County, we need to recognize that we are an incredibly large group made up of a large set of unique perspectives. I've said it before, right? But 112,000 people means about as many different ways of thinking about the world. And while we've done a lot to like summarize these groups and kind of box them together, that to me is what we need to be conscious of if we're thinking about the culture of this area. So
yeah, absolutely. And specifically, how does understanding the community of Cowlitz County help you be a better commissioner?
as a leader, my responsibility is to represent the community and make decisions in their best interest. Um, I see myself as taking on a very important responsibility, which is trying to sift through all of the unique perspective and come up with the best answer we can from all of that. If I am not conscious of all of the different ways that people in this community think, I might miss something. I remember talking at the very beginning of this whole series about how I was worried about missing ideas, and that's where a lot of my spirit for openness comes from, because I want to know if there's something that I might not see, because I recognize that my perspective is limited and that it's limited to what I've had exposure to. Exposing myself to the community of Cowlitz County helps me serve that community better. And in as many different ways as I can, I want to know who the people of Cowlitz County are so that I can serve that community. If I close myself off, I might miss stuff. And that's a risk that I personally am not willing to take. So that's how.
Awesome, Joe. Well, I really appreciate the thought there. Can't believe this is the last time we're going to be closing out, but it's been a journey, and I know we're going to jump back on in a second here and kind of spend a few minutes to talk about that journey, but I appreciate it, and I think that's the perfect place to kind of wrap this whole thing up with.
All right. Thank you, my